Morning, good afternoon, and good evening. And thank you so much for being here with us today for this Guesty for Hosts virtual meetup, Perfecting Your Pricing Strategy Amid Uncertainty. First, a few introductions. My name is Chang Kim. I'm the Customer Success Lead at Guesty for Hosts. And joining me today is Richie Khandelwal, co-founder of PriceLabs. Richie is an expert in revenue management and has developed innovative strategies to increase profits, both as an operator of short-term rentals and now as the co-founder of a dynamic pricing company. Richie, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Today's virtual meetup, I will begin by sharing Guesty's latest data and industry insights, and then cover some of the foundations and fundamentals surrounding revenue management. I will then invite our guest, Richie, to share some tips and strategies on perfecting your pricing strategy amidst these uncertain times. And after Richie's insight, we'll move on to our Q&A session, so feel free to send in questions you have. We'll get to as many questions as we can. So let's start by taking a look at some of the numbers as we look forward to the holidays and busy Christmas season. It should be noted that this is compiled from Guesty's own user data. On the whole, despite the uncertain times we're currently experiencing, this festive period seems to spell good news for hosts and the travel industry as a whole. Bookings are up across the board when compared to 2021, while the average price per night has remained fairly steady over the Christmas weekend. In the US, Christmas travel continues its popular growth trajectory. Bookings for Christmas weekend are 18% higher than last year, with average nightly rates 4% higher than 2021. This 4% increase weighs in at $609 per night, with reservations on average lasting around 5 nights. Across the pond in the UK, the British spirit is strong, and their current cost of living crisis has not seemed to impact travelers booking their Christmas holidays. In fact, bookings have increased even more than the US. Their reservations volume is 50% higher than last year, and only down 8% on pre-pandemic numbers, signaling an all but full recovery. The good news for British travelers is that despite the higher demand, pricing hasn't jumped from last year. Brits can expect to pay an average of £295 per night, on par with 2021's price per night over Christmas. And while the Americans and Britons break out their sweaters for winter wonderland, the Australians look forward to the summer heat down under. Australian Christmas travel is back and better than ever. Bookings have jumped since last year's celebrations, with booking volume up 42% from last year and a whopping 85% from 2019. So Aussies can expect to pay similar to the US for a room for the night, with average nightly rates at 597 Australian dollars per night, 4% up from last year. So that was a lot of information to cover, but the key trends you need to be aware of this holiday season are bookings have increased significantly around the globe compared to last year. Nightly prices remain fairly stable compared to last year. Prices have still significantly increased since 2019 pre-pandemic. Now, part of that price hike is down to the increased demand for short-term rentals that we're seeing, but a large part of that can be put down to the wider issue of inflation that's affecting our industry and general lives as a whole. In fact, while in the US, there's a 47% rise in average nightly rates just over the Christmas weekend since 2019, there's still been a significant 30% increase in average nightly rates away from this holiday season. Inflation is a hugely important thing to consider in the context of pricing strategies to ensure that you're not spending more money than you're making when hosting guests in your property. All right, in today's webinar, we're going to take a deep dive into the world of pricing and pricing strategies. But it's worth noting that having a pricing strategy is just one great way of generating more revenue for your property. And with a dynamic pricing tool like PriceLabs, it all happens automatically with no extra effort. And that's also Guesty for Hosts in a nutshell: more revenue, less effort. Our mobile platform automates your hosting operations, giving you the upper hand on better hosting. With Guesty for Hosts, you can rest assured that you can be a better host to more guests with less effort. Guesty for Hosts is geared towards smaller property managers, typically with 1 to 3 rentals that are often on the go. So we make it possible to manage everything from one easy-to-use app that works on both your computer and mobile device. And Guesty for Hosts has all the features you need to put your operations on autopilot. We've got a channel manager, unified inbox, automated messaging, and automations throughout. All right, and now I want to touch on the topic of why we're all here today, building the perfect pricing strategy. To give you an idea of what a pricing strategy looks like in practice, I'm going to play a TikTok video for you. So let's check out this awesome TikTok featuring Airbnb superhost JR Rivas.
Here's a hack to get almost 100% occupancy every single month on Airbnb. So first thing, I use this tool called PriceLabs, and I set my far out pricing rules so that if it's more than 75 days, you cannot book any less than 4 nights. And it's also priced at like a 13% premium. This automatically fills in a lot of my occupancy with really, really solid stays. So then your calendar ends up looking pretty full, but we have these gaps in here, and all we really do is fill in those gaps with super, super low pricing. Every single month, this strategy ends up making me at least another $1,000, and I end up with almost 100% occupancy month after month.
I'm going to take just quick 2 minutes to just talk about PriceLabs. So the folks who already are familiar with PriceLabs, apologies for talking about PriceLabs, and then we'll dive into strategies briefly of how to think about pricing during these uncertain times, right? For those who are not familiar with PriceLabs, PriceLabs is a dynamic pricing and market data software. We work with Airbnbs, vacation rentals, service departments, boutique hotels, and we help owners and property managers manage pricing and stay restrictions. A lot of people often ask, hey, is it the right tool for me if I have one property? And some ask us if we have 10 property, and some ask us if they have 100 properties. We have customers who range from having just one property and occasionally doing vacation rental to people who have, property managers who have 1,000+ properties, right? So we have the full gamut, and eventually PriceLabs is a tool that will help you make more money and save time in the process. We've been doing this since 2014. We actively price today over 170,000 properties worldwide. We have customers in 100+ countries, and our teams distributed across 8 markets now, and we're headquartered in US. In terms of tools, we have 3 key tools that we sell. Dynamic pricing is the most popular tool that we sell and that we're known for. We also have a free tool if you're on Guesty for Host. PriceLabs, you can connect PriceLabs with Guesty for Host, even if you don't want to use dynamic pricing, and you can quickly see analytics for your properties that will help you think through how do you want to price or adjust your properties. And then finally, we have market dashboards. These are market data tools where you can see what's happening in your market. If you're using dynamic pricing, you don't really need market dashboards, but some people prefer to do more manual pricing, in which case market dashboards can be very, very helpful. Like I said, primarily people use dynamic pricing. On average, what we have found is if you're not adjusting your rates frequently, you are losing money, especially in uncertain times. It's a lot more because if you're not reacting quickly to market changes, it can impact your revenues quite a bit. We've seen on average, hosts and property managers make somewhere between 10 to 40% more. And oftentimes people ask me, what does that translate to? Anecdotally, I've spoken to a bunch of hosts around the world, and normally a month or 2 months of using PriceLabs pays for annual subscriptions already, or even more, right? So that's kind of how the ROI of using PriceLabs translates. What is it that we do? Every day we go in and capture local demand trends around the market, around the world. We look at what's happening on Airbnb, we look at what's happening on VRBO, we look at what's happening on booking.com in terms of hotels, and we're capturing that demand. We're all algorithmically trying to come up with what should be the nightly rates for every given day. On top of that, owners can apply their own rules and strategies because not two owners are not created equal. You may have your own restrictions. You cannot do check-ins on certain days, or you can't do checkouts on certain days, or you can't do cleanings on certain days, etc., etc. And so you may have certain rules or restrictions of your own. You apply that. And then every 24 hours, we will send optimized prices and restrictions. I say restrictions, which means like I have a minimum night stay of 2 nights, or I can't allow check-in and check-outs on certain days. We update those kind of things, and every day we'll send it to Guesty, and then Guesty will propagate that to Airbnb and VRBO. Now, that's my spiel about PriceLabs. If you want to learn more about PriceLabs, look for hello.pricelabs.co, find us there. And at the end of this, I will also have a link and offer for new joiners who have not used or considered PriceLabs before. I want to dive into the topic of that Chang and Guesty team have set up for today, which is how do you think about pricing strategy, and rather perfecting pricing strategy during uncertain times. Firstly, I don't know if there is really a perfection that can be achieved in pricing strategy, because at the end of the day, you're playing with probabilities where you have a certain price and you're trying to see if that price you'll get a booking or not get a booking. But what you can do is optimize and try to get as much as you can, right? The very first thing to understand, and interesting to see the data from Guesty team about the Christmas season being so busy. There have been mixed signals from what we have seen in the market. We of course are coming out of a low season right now. November generally ends up being, especially in US and in Europe, ends up generally being slightly slower season. And in some markets, we saw it was slower than 2020. We're in 2022, right? Sorry, I'm confusing myself. In some markets, it was slower than 2021. In some markets, it did pace ahead of 2021. But we're also going into, once we go past the Christmas season, we're going into Jan and Feb and March, which generally, unless you're in ski markets, tend to be slightly slower seasons in a lot of markets, right? And so you do want to review your goals as these just the seasons are changing. Number two, we are coming off of a very, very high record seasons of 2021 and 2022. Don't know if the rally will continue, so we want to be prepared for that. And number three, there is this whole news about a potential recession, a potential economic downturn. We don't know what's going to happen with that, so we do want to be prepared for that. I do want to highlight as the market changes, you may want to think about how do you want to, what are your goals, your personal goals, right? Do you want to focus a lot more on guaranteed revenue? If you're focusing on guaranteed revenue, you may drop your prices, get bookings far out so that you can lock in revenue. Or do you want to focus on, opportunity cost and just high revenue? In which case you may hold back and see how the market's doing, but realizing that opportunity cost method is more risky versus guaranteed revenue gets you revenue, but could be lower, right? The one of the best examples of guaranteed revenue is just putting everything on long term, right? It's a lot more guarantee, but has the least reward. So you want to think about that. One of the things as you're starting to think about that that I want to focus on is talking about some KPIs, and many of you might be familiar with it, but some of you might not be. And so I do want to spend a minute, and not a few minutes, but a minute on talking about these KPIs. The very first thing that that we've adopted from hotels, but is still very important for your property, is understanding the RevPAR, which is what's your nightly rate that your property gets booked at times the occupancy, right? Because it's not just about your nightly rate and it's not just about your occupancy. What you're really concerned about is RevPAR. So say I can have a very high nightly rate, but I only get 10% of my days booked, or I can have okayish nightly rate, but I get 90% of my days booked. Which one would you prefer? That's kind of the decision that RevPar can help you make as you think about that, right? Occupancy, fairly straightforward. You do want to monitor your occupancies. You want to monitor your occupancy. What's your monthly occupancy? What's your certain seasons occupancy? How does that change year over year? You want to look at that. You want to look at your nightly rates, ADR, year over year. In most markets, like Chang had said, that ADRs are significantly higher in 2022 Christmas period compared to 2021. You want to see how you are doing yourself. Are you like, is there more room in the market for you to increase your prices? How are they compared to 2019? And you want to evaluate that. If you're not, or like if you whether you're using a pricing software or not, you do want to keep track of these metrics. You want to look at booking windows, especially, for example, booking windows. If you're not familiar with that term, that means if I'm from your booking date to the stay date, how many days are there in between, right? Whether you're in a last minute market, which is the stay is tomorrow and people are booking like a day in advance or a week in advance, or you're in the long booking markets, which is like people book 3 months in advance for a stay, right? So you want to understand that, and you want to understand how is that booking window pattern changing. For example, pre-COVID, people used to book a lot in advance, and then in COVID timeframes, we saw people booking very last minute. And then now again, people are starting to book slightly more in advance. We'll see what happens with 2023. But you want to monitor that because that gives you a sense of how far away are you from your guaranteed revenue or revenue projection targets, right? So for example, normally you already start getting bookings for your December period, Christmas period, like Chang was saying. And if you're not seeing that happen yet, you want to see what your booking windows look like, have the booking windows shifted generally, and even for the market, right? Length of stay, normally how long are people typically staying for? That's something that you want to analyze. The longer the stays at, of course, high ADRs, the longer stays are operationally more efficient for you, right? So you want to drive longer stays if possible. And then finally, pacing. This is something that's a metric that is a little hard to evaluate unless you're using certain software or you have some ways to quickly run the analysis. But you want to see how well are you booking relative to a prior period. So what Chang had shown there in terms of the occupancy rates for markets for Christmas season, that's essentially what pacing is. He's trying to see for those dates, how quickly are those dates booking, right? So if the dates have booked 47% more than the prior period, which means there was an opportunity to increase prices. And the hosts that haven't yet booked, they may have scope to get a lot more prices still because the inventory will probably be scarce, right? So you want to, these are metrics that you generally want to look at. I don't mean daily or weekly unless you're a professional operator. If you're a professional operator, you may want to look at these weekly. But as a owner, you do want to understand these metrics and how they're shifting, and then think about how should they impact how you run your business or how you run your pricing. For example, if you traditionally know, I get very low occupancies at certain ADRs in January season, it might be helpful for me to push occupancy higher, drop ADRs, maybe add monthly discounts or weekly discounts, and get those longer stays in. If I know in my market, want to track these KPIs not just for yourself, but also for markets. If you can see, hey, in my market, there are a lot of week-long bookings in January. Those snowbird folks who are coming down from, for example, northern parts of America to southern states, and they want to stay for week-long stays. Can I give them some discounts to drive my occupancy so that I can get those stays and lock those in? Now, as you start thinking about these uncertain times, and especially if you're in markets where you're starting to see a dip in occupancy, or if you're not sure what's going to happen, I have 5 quick rules here. I also want to specify that I and another colleague of mine had done a very detailed walkthrough of how you would implement some of these strategies in PriceLabs, and you can find that on our YouTube channel. But let me briefly touch on these strategies. Number one is understanding your market occupancy patterns, right? A lot of people sometimes get really worried about, I am not seeing any booking, any occupancy today, right? Something's gone really bad. I need to drop my rates. I need to do XYZ, right? It might just not be your property. It is probably holistically the whole market that's seeing an occupancy drop. And so you really want to understand where are you in relation to the occupancy, right? I don't have any easy ideas for you, for folks who are not using softwares to be able to see it, but I can say, like, if you're using PriceLabs, in PriceLabs, you can very quickly see how your occupancy looks like. So on the left-hand side, for example, I have an occupancy for a listing, how that listing's doing in relation to the market in terms of their next 10-day occupancy, in terms of their next 30-day occupancy or 90-day occupancy. So you can quickly see that. You can also see, for example, if I was worried about Christmas and I've not yet received bookings for Christmas, I can also see by date what the market occupancies look like, which is the right side of this graph. And I can see, hey, my market is, so they say this peak is Christmas. My market is right now 50-60% occupied. There is still quite a bit of time left to book. I don't need to panic and undersell today. I may want to hold my rates for Christmas for a little while longer, right? You can, if you go into market dashboards and PriceLabs, you can also see historical levels to saying what did occupancies look like historically for this, right? Having said all of this, if there are occupancy changes, PriceLabs does adjust your rates to drop prices or increase prices if the occupancies are lower. If the occupancies relative to last year are lower, we would be reducing prices. If they're higher, we would be increasing prices. If your property itself is not getting occupied, we might be adjusting prices as well. The one caveat is if your property is an extremely unique property where it really deviates from market, that's something that you really should think about. How would you price that kind of property? But the key thing being, don't panic and don't think about just because you've not received bookings, something's gone really, really bad. It's not just your property, it might be market wide. And if it is market wide, you may want to think about how do you change your strategy. You may not be able to hold on to your ADRs with a market wide downturn in terms of occupancy. You may have to drop your ADRs, for example, right? Or even your strategy of wanting to attract longer term guests versus shorter term guests. Specific to PriceLabs, as the market shifts, you want to review your base price and minimum price. But for the broader audience, again, going back to that ADR piece, you want to review your ADRs and see how do you want to change those. One caveat that I would add is if the uncertainty that you're seeing is not enough demand and not enough occupancy, you don't want to drop rates for like your next 12 months, right? You want to adjust rates for near term and see how the market is evolving. And same for if you're seeing a tremendous increase in your market, if you're seeing a tremendous increase in the market, you do want to increase even the far out rates, because the hope would be that they continue to be higher. And so because it's far out, you can still take the gamble of opportunity cost. So if you're using PriceLabs, I would say go in, review your base prices, review your minimum prices, and move them. If you're in the high occupancy markets, you want to move them higher. If you're in the low occupancy markets, you want to drop them. But be careful that you don't drop across the board. You may want to tweak certain things to make sure you're just dropping near term. If you're not using PriceLabs, if you're doing your own pricing, my recommendation would be to look at near term and see how you want to tweak your near term rates, especially if you're seeing low occupancies, a lot of uncertainty. In the near term, you want to adjust your rates, not really all through far out. Stay restrictions. I find this is the least used feature with hosts generally that I find, right? And it's one of the most, we talk a lot about pricing, but stay restrictions are the most, are not the most, but one of the biggest levers that you can pull to tweak how you make your revenue. I have, for example, an example of a rolling stay restriction here. As an example, this host traditionally has 5 nights on weekdays and 5 nights on weekends as their stay restriction, minimum stays. But if you focus on last minute, they are okay with taking 1 night stays within the last 2 nights. They're okay with taking 1 night on weekdays and 2 nights on weekends within the last 6 nights, and 3 night stays within the last month. And then outside of 90 nights, they're pushing people to book 6 nights and not anything lower than that. And outside of 6 months, 180 nights, they're pushing people to book 6 nights on weekdays and 7 nights on weekends, right? Now, traditionally, a lot of people think about this and say, oh, but by adding this restrictions, I am removing the ability for anyone to book my property, say outside of 90 nights, if they wanted to stay for 2 days, and I'm losing money, right? This is where, again, the concept of opportunity cost versus guaranteed revenue comes in. If you're really, really focused on that guaranteed revenue, you may want to allow people to book those 2 nights 6 months out. But the challenge is once you do that, no one can book those longer stays over that period anymore. And you've lost that ability to take a longer booking far out, right? And so in order to understand that, of course, our team does a lot of data analysis on it, and we give you recommendations on what your stay restrictions should be based on where your property is located, your market. We've been analyzing data for a really long time in markets. And so we can give you an understanding of what maximizes revenue in certain markets based on stay restrictions. But at a minimum, I think the easiest thing to the way you think about it is you should have a regular min stay. You should, in near term days, if you can drop those min stays, consider dropping them. And far out, you don't want to lose the opportunity of getting longer stays. So you want to have far out stays. You also see something that's called as orphan gaps as one of the thing here. Don't personally like that name. Maybe gaps should be just the name. But if you have a 5 night minimum stay and you get a gap of 3 nights, this kind of a tool can open up those days for you automatically, so that we'll allow 3 night stays. Of course, we can respect the minimum that you want to have. But again, in terms of strategy, you want to consider having these flexible minimum stay policies, and maybe even by season, right? So in PriceLabs, you can also control by season, where you say, in my summer peak periods, I want to push for longer stays, and in my shoulder seasons, smaller stays, and then in my really low seasons, I want to actually push for 14 nights or 30 nights kind of stays far out, right? So you can tweak a bunch of things, but think about how you're going to use your stay restrictions to your advantage. Low occupancy markets, longer stay restrictions, weekly discounts, monthly discounts, especially if you have time left to book. So if I'm thinking about Feb month, right? I still have about 2.5 months to book. That's quite a bit of time. Maybe for the next month, I really want to push and see if I can get longer stays in there, rather than getting those 1 night, 2 night, 3 night bookings in Feb, and really limiting my ability to get longer bookings, especially if it's a low season for you, right? My advice, there's no generic pricing advice, unfortunately. It really depends on your market. So be a little bit careful as you take my advice, right? And you want to evaluate how would you tweak it for your market. Rethink your discounting strategies. This is an important one. If you're getting a lot of bookings already, you may not want to have as many discounts. If you're not getting bookings, you want to have discounts. That's the very basic of it, right? But when I say rethink your discounting strategies, rather than thinking about dropping all of your rates, maybe you want to offer certain discounts to last minute stays, because you still don't have occupancy. Or if you're getting you're getting weekend bookings, but weekday bookings are drying up, you want to offer discounts to weekday bookings. Or we have something in PriceLabs, which is occupancy-based adjustments, tweaking that to saying, if my occupancy is running really low, I want to, no matter what's happening in the market, if my occupancy is running low, I want to reduce my ADR so that I can get more bookings, right? Oftentimes, these discounting strategies are not just to attract what's available in the market, sometimes they also change behaviors, right? Some of us, for example, many of us are familiar with how airline pricing can impact your behavior. For example, Fridays and Saturdays are generally busy on airlines. So maybe I will fly back on Monday nights, right? Or take the red eye or things like that, right? So people also, it's not just that you're trying to capture the market. Some of these discounting strategies end up just changing the customer segment that you can go after. So you may want to think about how would you discount. Key thing that I would say is in uncertain markets, you don't want to discount far out because you don't know what's going to happen. You want to affect your near-term, near-in strategies in particular. Finally, this is a debatable one. Depending on what kind of a situation that you're in, you may want to adopt flexible cancellation policies. If it's possible, you can't do this in PriceLabs. We don't take care of cancellation policies, but if it's possible for you to tweak cancellation policies, especially if you can offer cancellation policies to drive more bookings. And again, you can see the data in PriceLabs around cancellation policies. But if this can help you get more bookings, that's one thing that I would generally recommend if possible, right? And I think Airbnb's come up with a lot of fantastic tools around how you can impact your cancellation policies. I've heard both sides of the story from hosts, but there are some good tools, and do look into how your cancellation policies can impact your booking patterns. That was my summary from talking about things that you can think about as you're thinking about pricing strategy. There's a lot that we can dive into, get into specifics. Hopefully that's helpful. If you are new to PriceLabs, if you've not used PriceLabs before, and if you're considering signing up for PriceLabs, use Guesty YE 2022. That's our Black Friday offer, 25% off for first 3 months. It's valid till November 31, 2022. Chang, over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Richie, for that presentation. And now we can jump into the Q&A. We've got a question. How does PriceLabs aggregate its occupancy data?
How does PriceLabs aggregate its occupancy data? So we scrape data from Airbnb and VRBO to understand what's happening in the market. And then we run it against a comparable set of PriceLabs' own customer data. And we also get data from Key Data, which is a data provider in US, right? We scrape worldwide data, 6 million to 8 million properties. We come up with our logic to saying what's happening with the scrape data. Are these booked properties? Are these blocked properties? Are these not available properties, et cetera, et cetera. And then we compare that against the what we know the true data is. And that's how we figure out what's happening in terms of market occupancies.
Cool. We have a question where someone's asking, does PriceLabs overwrite Airbnb in Vrbo pricing and length of stay settings? So more of a technical question.
The answer is yes, but if you're seeing anything different, reach out to us at support. If you're using PriceLabs already, reach out to us at support, and the team can look into specifics.
Cool. And then we have a question about the slide that you had regarding the APIs, and someone's asking, does PriceLabs keep track of these KPIs for us? KPIs, not APIs.
No worries. Yeah, absolutely. In PriceLabs, and whether you're using PriceLabs' dynamic pricing or not, in PriceLabs, you can find this under portfolio analytics. If you connect your Guesty for host account with PriceLabs, you'll find these metrics under portfolio analytics. So, and you can get that for free, even if you're not using PriceLabs.
Awesome. We have someone asking, if your occupancy is always higher than the market, I should up my prices, right?
Yes, but depends. Like if you're in a high season, so this is where I said, depending on what's happening in the market, you want to think about your pricing strategy, right? If you're in a high season, you want to you have opportunity to increase prices without having as much impact on your occupancy. Versus if you're in a low season, you may not really want to increase your prices because you do want to push occupancy in those seasons more, right? So it depends a little bit on which seasons are you in, but generally, um, yes, if you have very high occupancies, you have an opportunity to increase prices.
Cool. Does PriceLabs factor in length of stay discounts on Airbnb? For example, 14-day, 20-day, 28 days stay discounts?
So automatically we don't. We're generally built for short-term stays, right? But we do have capability to show you data around what is a good discount to be used. And number two, we have capabilities where we tie up with Guesty, and we're able to send some of these discounts over to Guesty. And if not, you can also set them up in Guesty.
Okay. And then we have another question. Someone's asking, I understand PriceLabs overwrites the nightly rate. However, are we able to set maximum and minimum
100%.
Amounts?
Yeah. There are lots of ways for you to set up those controls, minimums, maximums, minimums by season, minimums by how far out. There are a lot of ways for you to set controls. And those controls are absolutely something that every person has different operational needs. And so we allow that.
Great. Let's see, we've got a question. How does Airbnb's algorithm treat listings with discounts?
Hard to say, and I think it's an ever-evolving thing. Generally, what I've seen is discounts do get pushed up, but I think it's an ever-evolving thing with Airbnb of how they're dealing with it, right?
All right. We've got someone saying, I've got PriceLabs, but I still get empty days, and then I go in and lower prices like 2 days before. I mean, just in general, is that the right kind of approach? It sounds like PriceLabs kind of does that for you, right?
We do that. So you may want to see if you're saying you're applying certain strategy every day, you may want to either look at last minute discount customization or last minute prices customization or occupancy based customization. Those two customizations can help you automate whatever strategy that you're trying to do, right? It's but having said that, it is possible to get empty days because either there's not enough demand in the market, and sometimes we won't go ridiculously low, right? And so that's where your operational controls come in, and you say, I'm okay with going a lot lower.
Got it. We do have somebody asking about Booking.com. Is that something that you guys integrate with?
No, we don't. Like we get data from Booking.com, but we don't send prices to Booking.com. Ideally, I would say use a property management system. Guesty for Host integrates with Booking.com, Chang?
Correct, we do. Yeah.
So yeah, use PriceLabs with Guesty for Host so that we can get your data seamlessly everywhere.
Exactly. Yeah. So if you connect Guesty for Hosts with PriceLabs, PriceLabs will push the pricing into Guesty for Hosts, and then Guesty for Hosts can in turn push that pricing out to the channels. So we're coming up on time here, and I think I had one other question. Okay, somebody's asking, do I need to pay for 2 subscriptions, one for Guesty for Hosts and one for PriceLabs? The answer is yes. Yeah, we are 2 separate companies. So the good thing is we both have pretty good discounts going right now. So please take advantage of that. We did have someone asking about Guesty in particular. They're asking, Guesty's ideal for 1 to 3 properties. I have 1 property currently, but I plan on growing. When I reach 3 properties, do I have to switch PMS? No, you don't have to. We don't kick you off the platform. You can grow with Guesty for Hosts. But typically, as you grow, we start to see people needing additional power in their software. And so for a lot of those people, it makes sense to transition to Guesty for Pros. I think we can leave it there for today. Just want to thank you again, Richie, for joining us and sharing your insight. Want to thank everybody who was on the call for joining us. Hope you found that information useful. Thank you very much, everyone.